Taylor Swift reminds me of two things. She reminds me of Ed Sheeran, and she reminds me of Marvel movies. All three of these things have a mass global appeal. And Taylor Swift is probably one of the most famous artists of all time, thanks to things like globalization and social media. You could even argue she's bigger at the moment than people like Elvis, maybe even Michael Jackson, based on how many people listen to her. And in my opinion, it's not based on merit. And that might be a spicy take to some people, but I don't think she's as talented as like Beyonce, Madonna, Elvis, Michael Jackson, in terms of like these absolute superstars. So, in my opinion, there's something else going on here which makes her so popular. And it's a whole host of things. It's, you know, globalized capitalism, it's social media, it's the image she presents herself. So I'm happy people more are seeing through this Taylor Swift image, because at the end of the day, Taylor Swift's image is carefully curated to be as profitable as possible. And in that she's like Marvel movies, she appeals to everyone. And there's nothing wrong with liking Marvel movies or Taylor Swift beyond like them like not being good art, in my opinion. But at the same time, it's designed for you to like it. And I think that's a trend you see across movies and you see across the music industry as well.
Okay, you have probably heard this from the title track. You smoked, then ate 7 bars of chocolate. We declared Charlie Puth should be a bigger artist. I scratch your head, you fall asleep like a tattooed golden retriever. Every line of that just gets weirder and weirder.
I guess she's trying to say he's like a golden retriever, but the image that it immediately comes up in your head.
You do not see a tattooed golden retriever.
Is a golden retriever with like a sleeve tattoo.
Like, so high school. Touch me while your bros play Grand Theft Auto.
I've seen this one, and what it makes me think of is like I guess it's trying to say like, okay, I don't know if this is what it means, but like your bros could be playing Grand Theft Auto like online, so they're not actually there. It sounds like a room full of your bros sitting around, and you're just like, yeah, touch like you're like sitting with them, and it's like, oh yeah, touch me while they do that. I know it's probably like
you're bringing too much literal context.
I know it's probably like the contrast of like, is it maybe like, oh, your friends are just playing Grand Theft Auto, like they're kiddie and like come touch, like, but it sounds like you're all sitting in a room, they're taking turns on Grand Theft Auto, and you're like, touch me while they play Grand Theft Auto.
Brand new, full throttle, touch me while your bros play Grand Theft Auto.
So I hope people subscribe to me on this channel, because I'm willing to say the unpopular thing at like one point in history, which then becomes the popular thing later on. So most famously, people have tried to cancel me originally back in 2020 because I made a video talking about how Mr. Beast's like YouTube content was grossly exploiting like poverty, and then, you know, years later now, loads of people hate him, right? So I made a video on Taylor Swift, and Holly featured on it as well, where I talked about her brand of corporate liberal feminism and her music as a consumer capitalist product, which isn't really artistic, in my opinion, for many reasons. And now, as me and Holly have been following the new album review cycle, it seems a lot of people are now agreeing with my assessment more. And I think it's clear to a lot of people now that Taylor Swift has had like an album which has had, you know, a bit of a mixed reception, where people are literally scared to review it badly with their names attached to it. Maybe we have to talk about Taylor Swift Inc., meaning the whole corporate brand of Taylor Swift, not just her as a person, and talk about how I was right, of course, but also just get into it a bit more, because more people are now feeling comfortable criticising Taylor Swift's music as a consumer capitalist product, because she's released an album, and I can't even believe this, with like, is it 31 songs?
I think it's 31, yeah.
31 songs on one album, and you guys will know, if you got a favourite artist, you're waiting like 3 or 4 years for like an 8 album, you know, an 8-song album sometimes. So I brought Holly back to talk about this because she covers, you know, entertainment and music way more intimately than I do. And we have lots of good examples to talk about because, like I said, it's not just us two saying this, it's lots of people now, including other artists. So I guess for my first point, I'm going to ask Holly about to explain it. So why don't you talk about the lead up to this newest album and talk about, as someone who reviews albums, and you have reviewed Taylor Swift's re-released album, haven't you?
Yeah.
You haven't reviewed an original one though.
No.
Okay, so talk about the process and talk about just like the general vibe in the music community, because for every sycophantic 5-star review giving it like the album of the decade or something, I know I'm exaggerating a little bit, there have been a couple reviews that have said, you know, it's a rare misfire. So why don't you just speak about all of this?
Anyone who is either a casual or a devoted listener of Taylor Swift will know that with a Taylor Swift album cycle comes a lot of hype before the album actually comes out. So we obviously knew that the Tortured Poets department was coming. What we didn't know was that it would be a double album. If you're a Swiftie, you might have seen some of the clues. She did the 2 fingers when she announced it at the Grammys, and then there's kind of been the 2 fingers emojis all over social media and stuff. So there was obviously hype for the new album. The album before this one was Midnights, which was 2022. So that was quite a pop album. And the vibe with this one was that it was maybe going to be something a bit more acoustic-y, folklore, Evermore vibes, based on, you know, the album art and just kind of the vibes around it. The big talking point was the fact that it was probably going to be about her ex-boyfriend, Joe Alwyn, and potentially Matty Healy, who she had a short fling with. Now that the album is out, everyone knows that it covers both of them, in theory. So I'd say that was the main hype that was kind of going on around this album.
And just to quickly join in as well, it also promised to sing about a tattooed Labrador as well.
Golden Retriever, actually, because if you're on Twitter or if you're on social media, you might know that some songs from the album got leaked right before, and that was one of the lyrics that came out. But then people were also sharing like AI, so I was like, is this an AI lyric or like?
And I didn't know it was actually meant, it's like a double album, whatever that means. It's still like excessively long even for one album. Like if you split that in half, 15 songs is quite high for one album, so 31 songs for one.
Let me double check just how many it is quickly.
So you talked about like the lead up. So, you know, I've been seeing the reviews pile in, and I don't know what you want to talk about first, like the fear among the reviews. And okay, why don't we start with you talk about what you think of this, and then we'll talk about maybe the reviews not being very honest, and that could be part of Taylor Swift's PR, which instills fear in people of actually giving honest reviews about these albums.
Okay, so the first thing I'll say is the first Taylor Swift video that I appeared in with you was to defend Taylor Swift.
It's too upsetting.
I said in that video, I'm not a Swiftie, not because I'm like, oh, I'm too cool to be a Swiftie. It's just generally because I don't consume Taylor Swift music on the same level that Swifties do. And I will say that I've had to do some album reviews of old Taylor Swift albums for an assignment of something that I've got coming out soon. So I've been diving into the lore a lot more and going onto Reddit and kind of like exploring like the stories behind the songs and everything, and it is quite interesting, and like I can see how you can get drawn in, but typically I don't really involve myself in all of that stuff just because I don't really like consuming music in that way where you're overly forensic with it. Like I like to, like, this is part of the problem why getting so much in one go isn't an enjoyable listening experience. But so the reason I came on the first video was to kind of like defend her a little bit and push back at some of your points, but I hate to say that I'm back this time as much more of a critical voice. No, I don't hate to say it because there's nothing wrong with criticising music of artists that you like. But basically,
I'm just ahead of my time.
No, so the general consensus with this album, it has got a lot of good reviews, as every Taylor Swift album does, a lot of 4 and 5-star reviews. But the brave, soldiers among the music press, some of them did come out with very critical reviews, but very fair in their criticism. And I am on the critical side for this album. I think it's extremely disappointing. Do you want me to get into the details of why I don't think it's good? Or do you want the overview? Okay, I'll just quickly say... one of the most positive reviews was...
Talk about it to someone like myself who doesn't listen to Taylor Swift that much, like, why is it bad?
Why is the album bad?
Yeah.
Well, before I get into that, I'll just quickly say that people were saying that the reviews were giving the vibe of like you're literally being held at gunpoint or like you're hostage or something, or like, you know, blink if you need help kind of vibes. Rolling Stone, their critic who reviewed it is a massive self-described like Swiftie, like massive Taylor Swift fan, gave it their instant classic thing, like their little sign off. Loads of other mainstream UK press and like international press as well were saying it was amazing and, you know, just praising Taylor Swift for all the usual Taylor Swift stuff. So should I get into why it's not good?
Yeah, and and you would say it's pretty much like objectively not good. It's not even just like, I don't know, it's not something weird where you can have like a very different opinion on it. It seems like the consensus with even like a lot of her fans, like I was reading that subreddit and I was like, this is just, it's like forgot what the phrase. Okay, I'm going to find it and I'm going to read it, but you carry on. But a lot of her fans are saying it's really bad.
Yeah, and I think you said in the last video that the Taylor Swift subreddit is surprisingly a lot more nuanced than you might expect. And that's something I found as well, because I've been on it a lot more recently. And it's really refreshing to see normal fans who are just like, I'm a massive fan of Taylor Swift, but I don't particularly like this bit. Like, just across her whole discography, or like, oh, like, what do you guys make of this lyric? I've interpreted it this way, but, you know, other people think it's this. Rather than just completely, like, devoting themselves to, like, everything she says and does, like, without question. You about to read something?
So just because we had a little break in recording, this is the comment I found, which made me laugh. I sent it to you a couple of days ago. I'm a huge Swiftie, and this album is not good, and Swifties are afraid to admit that. It's forgettable, nonsensical, and the sound is nothing special. Some of the lyrics, okay, most. I like that episode of Friends where Joey learns what a thesaurus is. I cannot make sense of this album because it's the musical equivalent of being fed from a child's play kitchen. Like, yes, I'm given what I'm told is food, but it doesn't actually do anything for me. I have to sit there and pretend to enjoy it as not to offend the creators. I hope after all the hoopla dies down, people admit it isn't good. And I got 3,600 upvotes.
And just to contextualise what I'm about to say with my criticism of the album in terms of how this fits into the Kavernacle YouTube, I think this album feels very much like, I think it's relevant to what we were saying about the capitalism stuff and like the overconsumption and
the product
and
basically.
The homogenization. Yeah. So my first reaction when I heard this was it sounds like an AI generator of what it thinks Taylor Swift sounds like and what her lyrics sound like. So if you listen to Taylor Swift, you'll know that there's a certain blueprint or a certain like pattern that her vocals and her melodies will follow. And I think I said in your last video that I like the music, but like that I had in my head like the songs of the music that I like that has a really distinctive musical element to it. Like songs like Style opens with like guitar, and a lot of the Folklore album I think has really distinctive like melodies to go alongside it. This album, and I'm going to ask you to insert a TikTok here because it just sums up exactly what it sounds like.
The verse that I'm singing in a major key, it's gonna move to the minor six eventually, then to the four cause we're wistful and unsure, then to the five, it's questioning and right, a breathy break course when we kiss back at my house, a breathy break course with some backing vocals right here, and then I'm singing really low just to keep you on your toes, building up a little more right before I hit the chorus. Baby, I will love you evermore. You wrote me the letter saying, are we out of the woods yet? Are we out of the woods yet? Are we out of the woods yet? Are we out? Fresh out the slammer, I know it's gonna go to the bridge. Now I'm singing the bridge really fast, yeah. Closest thing I can get to rapid. Now I'm singing the bridge really fast, yeah. Closest thing I can get to rapid. Sometimes I speak it just like this. Conversational just like your best friend. What's coming up next? You guessed it. We're going back to the core.
What this album sounds like to me is Taylor Swift writes her lyrics like poetry, or like these are my thoughts, but then she doesn't actually like look at them and think, okay, now how do I translate this into music? How do I translate this into something melodic? So it basically is, and okay, we're going to talk about this as well, but someone from the Pet Shop Boys described this to a T. It's basically
And it's what
like,
I said, so I'm ahead of my time.
It's
And I know music better than the Pet
it's
Shop
basically
Boys.
like two notes. It's like da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, or da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. And it's so formulaic, and that's why it sounds AI to me. It sounds to me like Taylor Swift has put out an album of, this is what my fans like about me. This is the kind of lyrics my fans like. This is the kind of sound my fans like. And that's why a lot of the critical response has been she's infantilizing her fans, as in her fans know better. They know that she can do better. And the things that the fans like, the reason she is so big is because of the way she writes her lyrics. Yet there's something about this album where it's so like overly hyper self-aware of what she thinks that it's like how she thinks her lyrics are being perceived. That's what these lyrics sound like. That's how it's I think she thinks that's being received by the fans, and the fans are like, no, like you're doing what you think that you think you do, but this isn't what you do. This isn't what's good. It's like, that's convoluted, but I hope that makes sense.
So what I think it is, and it's literally what I was saying in my other video, I call it the MCU of music. And with the MCU, you can put out a formula, or you used to be able to do this, right? When it was still popular, you could put out like an Ant-Man or something, very formulaic, pretty generic, right? And it would do really well because that's what people just wanted that. Nowadays it's a bit different, and this might be like the downfall of Taylor Swift, because if she puts this out again, people will start being like, this is shit. Like, you don't have the sycophantic press being like, oh my god, she's making like this new pop or something. So like for me, it's like, it's not even just, I think the thinking about her fans is a PR thing. She's not thinking about her fans, she's thinking about the mass market, right? So she's not just thinking about, oh my god, how do I appeal to my hardcore fans? That can be an element, but I think it's generally, how do I mass market this? And the big thing in music you always hear is when someone has a massive hit, and this isn't for Taylor Swift because she's had so many successful albums, but you either play into that or you do something different. So obviously, Dexy's Midnight Runners is the most famous example. Come On Eileen, one of the most famous songs in the last 50 years, right? And they basically said, do that, do more of that. And the lead singer said, I am not doing that, completely did a different thing. And then, of course, he famously, he was spotted at a job centre later on because he was broke, because he didn't do that, right? Because he cared about like the art, right? But what a lot of people do, you go the other way, you just essentially keep doing what you've done before but worse.
Yeah.
And that sounds like what with Taylor Swift's happening. And I know, like she said, she's been successful for like over a decade, but you keep doing the same thing over and over again because you're a consumer product and it's not about the art. And I was reading to you just before we went on this like little thread statement by an artist I like, released his first album in 3 years, 10 songs, talking about, you know, I've been working on this for like 3 years straight. And it's not like mass consumption, it's not like mass market. He does concerts, like little ones, but I'm saying like that's, I guess, the artistic side. But I guess every artist starts out like that, and it's whether what route you go down. Like you can just be consistent. Like we like lots of bands who put out stuff which maybe to people who are not fans of them, it sounds similar. Like Kings of Leon for me, put out an album every like 3, 4, 5 years. Maybe if you didn't know them, you'd be like, oh, that's the same. It's not, but like I get that. But with Taylor Swift, like how you're describing it to me, and the way you said it's like AI of her previous work.
Yeah, and the thing
it
is,
seems to me it's designed for mass appeal.
the thing is, Taylor Swift's career has always been defined by eras, and that's why her tour is called the Eras Tour, because every album is very distinctively different. I think at the beginning, there's like a more gradual sort of progression from the country to the pop, and then you get to Red, and it's very much treading the line between pop and country. And then you get to 1989, it's like, this is Taylor's pop album. She's here. She's a pop artist. Mainstream, like explosion into like kind of the beginning of like as we know her now, like that level of popularity. And then it kind of, obviously, you continue to see this evolution. She's very much a pop artist, but then you see her, you know, reinvent herself again with Folklore and Evermore. The only 2 albums where she's allowed herself to do the same thing twice, but both were very good. And you know, if she'd released that as a double album, that could have been like, oh god, this is too much. But they were conceptually similar, but released separately. I prefer Folklore, but yeah. Then after that, she goes back to pop again. This feels like the first time she has reached an era that is so like it's like indistinctive, if that makes sense. It's kind of like, what is the vibe?
The AI era.
Yeah, because Taylor Swift once said this thing at an award show that she writes her songs and she imagines 3 different types of pen: a glitter pen, a feather quill pen, or like a fountain pen.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like inspires the vibe. And obviously something like Midnight's would be like glittery, and then something like Folklore Evermore would be like the quill. So when she announced the Torture Poets department, the monochrome artwork and everything, everyone thought, okay, we're going to get more of those like maybe acoustic-y vibes, or like something more poetic, like the title would suggest. But it's way more pop, and it's way more like kind of like some 1989 vibes, which is really surprising. And like we were saying with the 31 songs, I said to you, if I was given a word count of an assignment, like an interview or like an album review or something, and I just say they gave me 1,000 words and I turned in 2,000, if I did that, I'd be told you're not being concise and you're not doing your job. But Taylor Swift can turn in 31 songs and assume that they're all good enough to see the light of day. And Taylor Swift has probably got hundreds of songs like in the Dropbox folder or whatever, as lots of artists do, but she can't honestly think that they are all good enough to go out. Like, if you're an artist, I think you should look at your body of work and be like, right, what is the very best of this creative spell, and what's going to form something cohesive, and like what's going to resonate with the fans.
If you genuinely believe she can't think they're all good for release, right, and you're releasing 31 songs in one go, not staggered at all, what is the reason for that? And
yeah,
absolute massive saturation, so much Taylor Swift. Think about the streaming charts, and like, you know, if you put on like shuffle, I know Spotify Shuffle does weird stuff, or just play songs that not even in your library sometimes, or radios, which, you know, I use. You put on like Taylor Swift radio, loads of stuff, and then she's just like dominating everywhere. And obviously, I mean, it's pretty clear there's no one in her orbit saying, well, that's shit.
Well, that's what
Like-
I said to you. I don't think Jack Antonoff and Aaron Dessner are sitting there saying to her, Taylor, like, you can do better. Like, if you're a creative, you need someone sitting there saying to you, look, this has potential or whatever, but like, you can do better than this, or like, why don't we do this? And I'm sure a lot of that went into the process. Like, even though for Taylor Swift it's not her best work, a lot goes on behind the scenes to get to the point where you can turn out an album, obviously.
But it's
like,
such a-
truly, who everyone around her tells her she's a genius.
Yeah.
So who is there saying like, no, like, Taylor, like, this is not your best work. Like, you can do better.
But that's what I'm saying. There is no incentive for anyone involved with her to tell her not to put out music.
Yeah.
Because music equals money. And that's what I'm saying. And loads of music, you're overwhelming people with the amount of music, right? Like, who can sit down and listen? Like, I listened to albums in one go. Or like, I went for a run the other day and I listened to that new album from that artist I was talking about. It's like 50 minutes or something,
Yeah.
right? So, nice hour. I couldn't imagine sitting down and like, let's just do this 31
Not
song
only that,
album.
but on every Taylor Swift album, there's like a big anthem or a big hit. It's like Midnight's Karma, of course, that's the big one. There was no standout song on this album. The single that's come out is Fortnights with Post Malone, who is like so irrelevant to that song, he literally doesn't even need to be on it. And like, there's a music video, it's got Ethan Hawke in it and everything. So like, it's, you know, they're trying to make it like a moment, but it's so just meh, like so bland. And that was the thing with this whole double album, like, because you can listen to the whole anthology, like all 31 songs. Nothing stands out. The only thing that stands out are the weird lyrics.
Yeah, so let's talk about the weird lyrics, and then talk about the Pet Shop Boys criticism, which is more relevant to what we've been talking about, but I just like the lyric stuff. So when people have been tweeting these lyrics, because I obviously I haven't sat down and listened to the 31, I don't even know if I've listened to one of them, to be honest. But
Yeah, I this is something I wanted to add with the last video. The Kavernacle does not consume a lot of new music. So
I do.
Okay,
I do.
you only consume the new music that you like.
Every Friday,
Hang on.
I go on new releases.
Okay, that's good, but there's a lot of popular artists that you've never even had any curiosity to go and be like, what's the big deal about, and go listen to them. So I'm just saying that you are more of a hater than maybe.
I am, but I'm not fucking wasting my time on call. It's like people saying, like, have you seen the latest Marvel movie? Like, I'm not wasting my time doing that, because I know what I'm going to get, right? With Taylor
Yeah,
Swift,
okay.
I know what she sounds like. So the lyrics were going viral because they were so fucking stupid. And I get out of context, a lot of lyrics can look really dumb, right? But these looked even more stupid than usual.
So Taylor Swift has some weird lyrics, and like she has some like quirky lyrics, and I want to use this example to show that I'm not being like unnecessarily like just like just hating on the lyrics for like no reason. There's a lyric on Karma where she says, did you hear my covert narcissism? I disguise as altruism like some kind of congressman. Oh no, sorry, is that Karma? No, sorry, that's Anti-Hero. And it sounds really stupid to just say it, but when I listen to that, like it hits so hard, and like there's a real like vigor and like hatred in her voice almost, and I think that like really lands. So I just want to make the point that like if you read it out of context, it would be weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay, so there are 4 songs from this album where you need to hear these lyrics. On Florida with Florence and the Machine. All my friends smell like weed or little babies.
And obviously, like, you obviously know what she's going for in terms of like when you're at that age, 34, you have the split of either your friends are raising a family or they're still acting like how they've always acted.
It's the way she sings it as well. She's like, little babies. And it's just like, that lyric doesn't work with the way you're singing.
Weed babies.
Yeah. Okay. You have probably heard this from the title track. You smoked, then ate 7 bars of chocolate. We declared Charlie Puth should be a bigger artist. I scratch your head, you fall asleep like a tattooed golden retriever. Every line of that just gets weirder and weirder.
Holly said I was the first person to say, I guess she's trying to say he's like a golden retriever, but the image that it immediately comes up in your head
see a tattooed golden retriever.
A golden retriever with like a sleeve tattoo.
Like, obviously, if she's talking about Matty Healy, like, yeah, you can, like, from the 1975, you can kind of see that.
So why I hate that lyric is it's just so specific. Like, it's clear, like, it's clearly like just ripped straight from her memory, but it's like so detailed. And I know it's like trying to paint a picture, but then you know who it's about. It's just kind of gross. It's like, oh,
but again, it's the way she sings that. Yeah, it's the way she sings it as well. It's like a tattooed golden retriever. It's like, doesn't sound good. Okay, so high school. Touch me while your bros play Grand Theft Auto.
I've seen this one. And what it makes me think of is like I guess it's trying to say like, okay, I don't know if this is what it means, but like your bros could be playing Grand Theft Auto like online, so they're not actually there. It sounds like a room full of your bros sitting around, and you're just like, yeah, touch like you're like sitting with them, and it's like, oh yeah, touch me while they do that. I know it's probably like
you're bringing too much literal context.
I know it's probably like the contrast of like. Is it maybe like, oh, your friends are just playing Grand Theft Auto, like they're kiddie and like come touch, like, but it sounds like you're all sitting in a room, they're taking turns on Grand Theft Auto, and you're like, touch me while they play Grand Theft Auto.
Okay, I hate it here. My friends used to play a game where we would pick a decade we wish we could live in instead of this. I'd say the 1830s, but without all the racists, and getting married off for the highest bid. So what annoys me about these lyrics is obviously all of Taylor Swift's career and her albums have revolved around who she's been dating, and everyone has always been able to work out, you know, in theory, who they've been about. What's really annoying about this album, because, you know, it's a breakup album of sorts about breaking up with someone you spent 6 years of your life with. She probably thought she was going to marry him. She probably thought she was going to be with him forever. And it's like the least insightful and like moving lyrics. So she has a song called So Long London, obviously Joe Alwyn is from England, and it's not sad. Whereas her other breakup songs, like All Too Well, obviously she was younger, it's very like potent, like very much captures that age and feeling like that. Her best lyrics and her best breakup songs make you feel how she felt from that breakup and that heartbreak. This feels like there's a lot of obviously like bitterness in it, but I'm like, what do these lyrics don't evoke anything. I don't understand what you're trying to say. Like, I'm not getting any emotional response from this. It feels, like we said, AI. It just feels really impersonal.
The 1830s one, like, I mean, I think people are outraged at it for maybe the wrong reasons.
It's a bit performative.
It's just kind of like, why have you got to mention the racist part? Like, you can want to live in a different time. Like, it's like saying, I don't know, I wish I could go to 1400s, I don't know, what Rome and look at Michelangelo painting, but I completely disregard the Crusades and killing Muslims at that time. It's like, Oh yeah, but don't worry, I wasn't okay with the slavery. It's like what? It's like yeah, we know you. We know if you romanticize. It's like if I want to go live in Napoleonic France, I don't have to then go say, but I disagree with Napoleon's invasion of Russia or something. It's like it's like yeah, we know you don't agree with the racist. You don't need to disregard without all the that wouldn't that be nice if all the racists went there, but we don't need to like say that because like people want to live in like it's like oh I want to live in the 1960s, listen to the Beatles, but I'm against Jim Crow. Like it's
yeah, okay, you're giving this way too much thought. Yeah, she didn't need to say it. Is basically the main thing.
It's just funny.
Okay, so the Pet Shop Boys' Neil Tennant did an interview with Q Magazine.
Yeah, I don't actually like the Pet Shop Boys that much. They're like one of the main inspirations for the Killers, which is weird because they don't sound similar.
Well, they're like legendary, and they just have a new album.
They're in Grand Theft Auto 5 for all the Gen Z who are listening.
He said, she's got a great voice, by the way, and the production's beautiful, but melodically, it's all sung 1 or 2 notes going up and down. But anyway, it's a fascinating thing. And then he said that he thinks the massive success is due to the fans' desire for a collective experience, which is, I think, what we touched on in the previous video. And then he said, I sort of appreciate that, and I like the fact that it brings all these people together, even multi-generational, but I just think the one disappointing thing is the music, not even the lyrics, the music. Off the back of that, if you're a fan of Taylor Swift, you'll know that she's worked with Jack Antonoff for some time. She famously worked with Jack Antonoff and Aaron Dessner from The National on Folklore and Evermore, and everyone was like, wow, what a great collaborative relationship they all have together. And if you've seen the Long Pond Sessions film, you'll see kind of like a bit more of like what went into that. They both worked on this album, but it's completely different, and I haven't read it yet, but Rolling Stone has done an article about why Taylor Swift and Jack Antonoff have outgrown each other, because Jack Antonoff's music and production is just like sort of like low-key synths, it's kind of like sizzling, and there's like some like really boring just like drums and everything, and it's like this is so it's like sample music or something, and it's
like
just
elevator lift music.
It's just like there's nothing for her to work with here, and I wonder if that's why the lyrics come off as they do. Like, I don't know if this is probably out there somewhere, if she makes her own melodies and then brings it to him, or if he brings her a melody or whatever. I know she's kind of started with piano melodies before, but it's just like so bland, and I think that's a big part of like why they're so indistinguishable from one another, particularly on this album.
And I actually said that in the last video before this album. I say it's like Ed Sheeran. I can't tell a lot of the songs apart from each other, because like with that video hopefully we showed, Ed Sheeran's very similar in that so many songs are so formulaic.
He's the same though. He sings everything the same. He writes his lyrics, and now he's like, now to deliver them, not to sing them in a particular
with him
way.
as well, he progressively, that's what happened with him, is that he started sounding very different, and if you listen to his first album, it still sounds different to his new stuff. But then like 2014, he got like mass appeal with that the Division symbol album. He got mass appeal with that, like
Divide.
Absolutely insane. And then every single song he's sung since has sound like the exact same thing. And that's what Taylor Swift is doing now, and that like distinct to most people, not to me because I don't listen to her that much. And then it's like same, and I bet the next thing will sound the same as well.
I don't know, because maybe she'll come back fighting and be like, no, you were wrong. Because that's the thing, this is another criticism I've seen. Every album, Taylor Swift has kind of had something to be fighting for. Where, like, with Reputation, it was like, I'm going to hit back at the critics, blah, blah, blah. With, like, various albums, it's kind of like, this is my breakup album, I'm coming back, and, like, or, like, oh, this is me, 1989, had her, like, moving to New York and stuff. There's always been a very, like, I think, strong sense of, like, where she's at in her life, or, like, why she's kind of making the album, or what the overall sense of it is. Maybe less so with Midnights, but I feel like I liked Midnights. I feel like there was good songs on that, so maybe it was less important. But now it's like, okay, she is at the absolute peak of her popularity. She's on this absolutely insane, like, massive stadium tour going around the world. Like, she's coming to the UK this year, she's going back to America, and like to an extent there is a sort of exemption from criticism of a certain kind. She's obviously aware of like her critics, because it always comes into her music, but like for the most part, it's kind of like, oh my god, we all love Taylor Swift, like Swiftie, blah blah blah, whatever. So it's kind of like, what's happening right now? Like, what is the point?
Yeah,
and it's like, you could have said the Torture Poets Department is just going to be a breakup album, but it's like, but it's not. It's not like that. Doesn't feel like those emotions are in there. I don't get it.
And we can move into like Taylor Swift as a corporate entity in terms of the review stuff. So what I always hate about Taylor Swift is how uncritically people consume her music. In terms of like, when I see Spotify Wrapped and stuff, and she's the top at so many people, I'm like, why? And
She was in my Spotify, right?
I know, but Taylor Swift to me feels like music for people who don't actually listen to much music. The same way with Marvel movies often feel like movies for people who don't actually watch many movies. And the way people consume everything now, like from books, like with Book Talk, to music, is so different in that maybe more of average is what people want than less of good. Like, they want to just be like, here's more stuff, here's more stuff, here's more stuff. Because it's like...
You think people want average? Is that what you said?
People want more, and they don't care about the quality as much. That's what consumer capitalism essentially is with everything. You want more. You don't want to pay as much. Like, if she released a new album, 10 songs, and she said this is 10 quid, no streaming, there'd be an uproar about it, wouldn't there?
Yeah.
Even though it would do well, she wouldn't do that, right? But it's all about overwhelming, like with consumerism, like Marvel.
I do think that an element of it is the whole like ceremony around the release of the album. So the excitement that you're seeing, a lot of people are excited about the music, but a big part of it is also just like, oh my god, new Taylor Swift album is coming. This is about to become my whole personality. Blah blah blah. Yeah.
But it's I find a lot of it's just manufactured and inauthentic, and it's completely a very successful marketing strategy to get people, and that's why I think now her PR team, because it's obviously not Taylor Swift running her social medias, they're surprised that people don't like this, and they're going out of their way to make people feel bad for not liking it. So we'll talk about the reviews because you write reviews. Let's talk about the Twitter account for a second.
And it's on Instagram as well.
Yeah, so Taylor Swift, if people don't know, her personal account, like I said, obviously I don't believe she's personally doing this. It's probably like a team of people. They're finding good reviews from not irrelevant but very small time critics working, and I would say
some of them are big, but some of them are.
But a lot of these outlets are not the go-to for music reviews. You're not going to. A lot of them are like not even the biggest British newspapers. They're like smaller British newspapers, and she's quote tweeting them, not saying thanks for the good review. She's writing song lyrics.
Yeah.
On top of them, it's really strange. But also, it's like incentivizing people to give her good reviews of, oh my god.
You've missed out the fact that she's tagging the journalist.
Okay, I didn't see those ones. I'm gonna go on.
She's tagging the publication and she's tagging the journalist. So if you've got like 400 Twitter followers and Taylor Swift is tagging you, you're gonna be like, oh my god, Taylor Swift has just tagged me.
Yeah, and it incentivizes, obviously.
Yes, this is why this has bothered me so much.
Taylor's reading.
Because I said to
Big Brother's reading.
I said to you, I gave the 1989 re-release positive review. So, you know, if she started doing that back then, and it was like, oh my god, Taylor Swift tagged me, that incentivizes people in the future to write good reviews, so you get tagged and publicity from Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
And I just think there's something deeply cringe about being that famous and that successful and hanging on screenshots of like positive reviews from critics. I think
it's not
if you care about your art that much, yeah, but she does also post like from her voice on her Twitter and stuff. So people go to that social media and read it and believe it as her like posting her voice and stuff. I just feel like when you get to a point where you're so famous and like so successful, and if you really care about your art and like the art you put out as a songwriter or a musician, you should get to a point where you don't care about the reviews. Isn't that the absolute goal? I am so famous and so successful and I have such a devoted fan base that the reviews don't mean anything to me. But she really cares. She really cares about how people respond to her in the public eye.
You know about that more than me, but to me, I don't think she's personally read most of these reviews. It's her team being like, let's find the good ones, tag the journalist.
Yes, but to put that on her personal,
Yeah.
Because can I just say, I follow Taylor Swift's PR as well. They obviously say, look at all the 5 stars.
Yeah.
But to put it on her personal Instagram account,
But
it's like, what
it's
are you doing?
not off the cuff. This is so like strategic.
It is off the cuff.
No,
I think they're like,
no.
oh my god, the reviews are bad. We need to spotlight the
It
good
might be a
ones.
response, but there is like 5 people sitting in a room without her talking about how we respond to.
But that's the thing.
The
she's never done this before.
Because
So
she's
when-
never had this negative.
Exactly, which is why it's so blatant that that's what they're doing.
It's just so manipulative. But that's what. But the whole because the whole industry is, like I said in my last video, they all promote her, right? You can't be critical. Same with things like Arctic Monkeys sometimes as well. You can't be critical of certain artists because everyone is such like it's music journalism, like most entertainment journalism, is a massive circle jerk. Like, if you're someone who comes out and says, I hate challengers, that's the new one. If you say that, people are like, oh my god. Yeah, but like, I'm saying a lot of entertainment journalism, when something becomes popular, like Fallout right now, it's good business to start talking about how great Fallout is, right? It's good business because everyone likes it.
Mm-hmm.
If you come out, if IGN comes out and go, we fucking hate the Fallout show, they would never do that. They would never do that. They wouldn't run a review that gave it 3 out of 10.
I just want to say though,
That's what I'm saying.
like, obviously, I just want to say that if you see a critic's review go live on a website, unless they are very well established with their own name, there is probably going to be some editorial involvement with the publication and the writer. So,
Which we all know.
so, but what I was going to say, and this is how I try to approach the stuff I review. I personally prefer interviews and stuff. Like, I do review stuff, but just in the sense of like what I prefer to write, I think there's more room for nuance and stuff in interviews and features. But when I do an album review, I ask myself, what's more important? My personal integrity, knowing that what I've put in that review is what I truly believe, or the like positive response that it's going to get from like fans and maybe even the artist.
Yeah, and access.
And it's a nice thing, like if I've reviewed smaller artists and they're like, oh thanks, this really made my day, and I'm like, that's a really nice thing, but I wrote that because I believed it. I'd feel icky if I was like, this is so great. And just one more thing, it's hard. You have to refine that voice as a critic. When you start writing reviews, you're gonna feel drawn to saying a lot of positive things, but you have to listen to that little doubting voice in your head and say, no, that wasn't quite right, or like, no, like I didn't like that. And you have to like follow that critical instinct and that critical voice. So that's what I was gonna say with all this Taylor Swift stuff. Like, the critics who are putting out the 2 and the 3-star reviews, I think like they're the people that are going to look back and be like, I did my job. I'm a music critic.
Like me.
And and I wrote what I believed.
Yeah.
Whereas other people are going to look back, because I've had that where you're like, oh, do you know what? Like, and you have like kind of
I've got you for it before.
when I have my old YouTube channel and you're like, why did you give that? And I'm like, I don't want to give it like 2 stars. And you're like, it's always, but no, but like it's a skill that you have to like practice and stuff. But yeah, all this to say, I feel like Taylor Swift posting those reviews is setting a weird precedent where now people are going to be reviewing the next album like, well, will I get a tag from Taylor Swift if I review this positively? It's just so weird. I don't think she should do it.
I also think the nature of reviews has changed in that even the artists themselves, they take it as like a personal fucking attack. Like, I know we always talk about this book, but Oliver Stone's book, and where he talks about the reviewers is quite interesting in that he does remember the reviewers who give him good reviews, but he doesn't hate the reviewers who give him bad reviews.
And I was thinking about this today. Was it Martin Scorsese who Roger Ebert respected him so much and was gutted when Roger Ebert didn't like one of his films? But imagine having that relationship with a critic. It's like, Martin Scorsese wasn't like, oh, Roger Ebert, you're not even a filmmaker, I don't care what you have to say. He's like, oh my god, this guy is like a legend in his field, and I'm really like disappointed that I didn't make something up to scratch.
Yeah, but it's I mean, it's the nature in that a lot of the strategy now, and because of capitalism, most press acts as PR, and music press is proof of that. Like that, was it the Time piece I referenced last time, where it's just like I've read some good Time profiles where they and Rolling Stone where they sneakily got the people like David Dobrik or Mr. Beast. Like they're actually thrown in like, here's all the bad stuff. Like we did spend a lot of time on. But the Taylor Swift one is like, it's literally shutting down criticism in the thing, because it all relies now on like critics do not see themselves, and I talk about this with music, gaming journalism as well. They do not see themselves as critics. They see themselves as
like, so a lot of them also, it's like I want to be in the industry. So if I start going on a rampage against Taylor Swift's new album, if I give it 1, say it's crap, like what access am I ever going to get? And you, like you're saying, because you deal with PRs, if you're an absolute savage, like let's say like with me, I'm a bit of a hater. If you're a savage, you're not going to get access ever. And it happens in gaming as well.
The thing is, it's like big risk equals big reward. Because if a savage gives a review a good review, then an album really good review, they're going to be like, well, I believe that, and that's why I go to critics' reviews of publications I don't necessarily agree with. I always read the Telegraph's film review because they have a really good film critic there. There's an independent, as in the independent film critic. I always go to her reviews because I'm like, I know the people that write with their honest voice and their honest opinion. And once you start to clock that someone is writing with that purple prose and they're just trying to make it sound good rather than this is my opinion, you start to clock that and you're like, well, I can't trust this anymore.
I think with
and
music,
that's what you lose with like these reviews when they're overly positive. It's like, well, where is the criticism? Just can I jump in quick? It was the same with Beyonce's new album, Cowboy Carter. I do really like that album, not as much as Renaissance, but like again, like overwhelmingly positive response. I think more deserving, so way more than Taylor Swift. But then people were saying on Twitter, like, where is the criticism? Not to be a hater, I just want to read like a good critical eye on it. And I think it was the New Yorker it was called Beyonce is not going to burn down the barn or something like that. And it wasn't like this music is good, this music is bad. It like really looked at like what's Beyonce trying to do? Like what's this album saying? Like is she trying to like take down all of these sort of like American cultural values and stuff, or like, you know, where is she coming out from like where she's at in her career and everything? That was really interesting to read because it's like, I'm not reading this to be like, yeah, this is bad. It's like criticism is also to understand the art better, and that's what you lose when someone is just like overwhelmingly positive. It's like, well, I don't even necessarily understand this album better because it's just all praise.
Because a lot of stuff is performative. Music, more than most things, is seen as like an extension of yourself, like your taste. Some film bros have this with like, they might love Christopher Nolan so much, for example, they can never criticise him properly. But I think with music, it's more like an extension. Like if you say the music you like is bad, it reflects poorly on you. So if you're, and Taylor Swift fans obviously build their whole community on, we like Taylor Swift songs, right? So if you start saying, well, that's bad, the next one's bad, and it's like, well, your whole personality is becoming this one artist's music. So like, you know, if you attach yourself too much, it's hard. So it's actually incentivized for you personally to say, well, my taste is good. Taylor Swift's new album is good and I like it and this is why it's good.
Well, on that note, you also attach your like identity to these artists, so it's really disappointing when it's bad. And I mentioned in the last video that I was a massive Paramore fan growing up, like loved them so much, like one of the strongest like musical connections I've ever had to a band or an act. And now I don't listen to them because I don't really like the new stuff. Like, I will listen to it, but I don't really go back to any of the new stuff. Yet Paramore is still very popular, supporting Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
But it's like, I just have to accept that. Like, I'm not connecting with it anymore, so I'm going to go find something else. That's something you asked me in the previous video. Like, what do I go to Taylor Swift for that I can't get elsewhere? I'm not going to the music to like find something like, oh, I need this or I need this kind of like release. You just connect to things and it might serve something that you need in that time that you're listening to it, and you might surprise yourself and be like, oh, this isn't really what I normally listen to, but it's kind of fulfilling something at the moment. And obviously there's not like a ceiling to how many artists you're allowed to listen to, but you just have to accept sometimes if you're kind of going off it, you're going off it. Maybe that artist, it's this whole thing of like, does the artist continue to make music to serve the fans, or do they make the music to serve themselves? So if they start going off in another direction that isn't aligning with how you feel, what you're responding to, you have to be like, okay, well, maybe I'm not as big a Taylor Swift fan anymore. But that would be absolutely like incomprehensible to a Swiftie. To be
also,
like, well,
for
I'm
a lot
just
of
gonna
people,
not like her.
a lot of people into music, liking Taylor Swift is, I wouldn't call it a red flag, but it's so uninteresting to me. Like if I met someone and they told me their favourite singers were Taylor Swift, Ed Sheeran, who else is popular? I don't know, Beyonce, Dua Lipa, I'd be like, that's all fine, like what you like. But then it's uninteresting because it's like you're saying, the criticism of you're just consuming. You're consuming the popular thing, and you have no incentive to go explore on your own, looking for stuff that resonates more. Not snobby, but I'm saying like a lot of things for me is why I hate, as a massive contrarian as well, why I hate consumer capitalism and like cultural. I forgot what the term I use.
Homogenization.
Yeah, it's just that everyone consumes the same stuff, and with the Taylor Swift thing, you have that like FOMO stuff of like, I want to be in this group. But for me, it's like you don't listen. Like when I listen to certain bands, like the album I referenced earlier, they have like lots of singers on it. And I go listen to the singers, and I'm like, do I like their stuff? I'm like, no, but I'm willing to give it a chance. And I feel like sometimes you're just like, and that's why Taylor Swift putting out so much is like, well, there's my whole personality for another year. She put out 30 songs, stick that in my playlist. And like, yeah, like whatever you like, I'm not hating on it. But like with mass consumption, I'm just not accepting that the most popular thing is the best thing, and Taylor Swift, just because she's popular, is good.
Right.
I'm not accepting that.
So what I would think if someone said all those artists to me, I'd be like, okay, yeah, they're good, but that kind of makes me think that you don't seek out other music. Not like, oh, you don't go and find like the coolest new indie artist, whatever.
Yeah.
But like, for example, if someone says to me, oh, I'm really into Caroline Polachek and Ethel Cain and like kind of the people I mentioned before, I'd be like, yes, that's my vibe, because that's pop, but it's a little bit more like indie and alternative and underground, and you got to dig a little deeper to find it, because you're not going to find it on the charts. So that to me, I'll be like, oh yeah, like, so you're into music. Whereas if they just say like people on the charts, I'd be like, okay, yeah, that's good, but like, because
it's designed to be liked.
No,
is
I know.
my point.
Yeah, and I agree.
Both of these videos.
One other thing I want to say as well is the weird thing about people reviewing Taylor Swift albums, especially the people who review them and they're fans of her, is they're reviewing it through the lens of the next installment in the Taylor Swift cinematic universe, a bit like the MCU.
Yeah.
So you're not reviewing it impartially as a piece of art. If any other artist released that album, sang it that way, with those lyrics, you'd be like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
What is this? But because it's Taylor Swift, it's like, well, and context is important. You shouldn't review anything in a vacuum. Like, if you're a good critic, you're going to know that context to kind of colour the piece.
Unless that's your thing. Like, reviewing stuff that you aren't familiar with, I guess.
So, it's just kind of like, if you stick on that album and then you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe it's not her best songs, but you know, she had a breakup this year and she's come back fighting and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like...
It's a parasocial element.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just weird. And I don't know, like... Yeah, so just if you're reviewing it and you're too in your head about, like, everything that's happening in Taylor Swift's life at the moment, and you're trying to force all that context into the album to be like, oh, well, now we have a Matty Healy song, now we have a Joe Alwyn breakup song. It's just like, what, like, at what
you're
point...
in it for the gossip.
Yeah, and Taylor Swift knows at this point that each album is going to be received as, oh, they all know that this is about so-and-so. And it's like, that is so boring.
It's like when Marvel starts relying on you knowing everything about the cinematic universe before you watch it, you know it's like a bad movie.
Yeah.
And that's personally why I got turned off a lot of Marvels, because I stopped watching it. It's like, who the fuck are these characters? But one more thing I want to touch on the review. So, was it Paste magazine wrote a review?
Oh, was it Paste?
Something like that. You can check for me now, but I'll give people the context. Basically, there was a negative review written about Taylor Swift's new album, and the editorial team decided to leave the name of the author off the piece because of the harassment they would get from Taylor Swift fans. Did they say including death threats?
No, I think they just said threats.
Okay, so I have a bit of a spicy take on that, as someone who gets way more hate on the internet than probably anyone watching this video, unless you're actually in a similar position to me or you actually are famous.
I enjoyed that piece, by the way. Like,
I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm saying I get leaving your name off it, but for me it's multiple problems. For me, part of the reason you leave the name off it as well shows a problem with access. You can hide behind, oh, it's the fans, but it's also, well, this journalist's career might be impacted, which I'm not saying is on the fault of the journalist, but it shows how much problematic like the industry is that it's so beneficial for them not to have that name tied to that piece. Because then Taylor Swift's PR is not going to know who it is, right?
I do think it is, in this situation, though, more about protecting them from the abuse and stuff.
And also, I get like how abusive people can be online. And I just think... I think the K-pop Taylor Swift stuff, it is insane. I've got it as well, like for my Taylor Swift videos, people calling me like incel virgin, but most of it is like teenagers just being stupid. Like I get it is bad for your mental health to be dogpiled, like because you've been dogpiled by K-pop fans. I know because I obviously gotten so much hate since I've been starting it. I think it is a bit more like it isn't just about the harassment. I'll say that is part of it, and obviously they would seek out that person
I don't know if I agree with
and
you.
quote tweet them, but I also think it's part generally of like, oh, like, you know, I mean, do they do it to take a dig at Taylor Swift and the fans, being like, we have to do this?
No, I think you're overthinking it. All the stuff you say about Access as well, if you write a bad review, they're not going to be like, we're never working with you again. It's just like, it's a bit hard because it's the same with like...
Certain industries do that.
Yeah, but I don't know necessarily if that's as big a thing in the music industry. They'll just leave your review off of like when they do the roundup of like, look at all the good reviews. But it's like I said, if you want those reviews to hold weight, you have to accept that there's going to be bad reviews.
Yeah.
So they're going to be more potent when you can be like, this person or this review... this outlet, who are notoriously harsh, gave us 5 stars. So
would you want your name on a negative Taylor Swift review? If you gave this new album 2-star for one of the bigger outlets you work for, would you want your name on it?
I would, because like I said to you, I could walk away with my head held high and be like, I wrote what I thought.
Yeah.
And for me, that is more important in being like a good critic. But like I said, like for me, it's not always even necessarily the criticism thing that I'm drawn to. Like that's why like Rolling Stone don't do star ratings anymore. They have their instant classic thing, but there's this whole debate about, you know, an album review deserves more nuance than just like here's how many stars
I do get
there
that.
are.
Yeah.
But
like
no,
giving
I
classic status to
would rather
30. How do you do that to a 30-song album that's been out for like how much in advance they've got that album? Like a week?
maybe even sooner, like a few days. Or like
How do you a 30-song album instant classic? Like in like 20 years time, I'd be like, yeah, remember that 30-song Taylor Swift
but the
album?
thing is, not that you should be able to be like, oh, I'm going to compare this album, but like if you think the Torture Poets Department is an instant classic, what does that make Red? What does that make 1989? You think they're all as good as each other?
And they're all-
Come on, be serious.
Yeah, like it is just like I and that's the thing is when it's all about taste, you kind of sometimes you put your objectivity out the door and you don't review, like you're saying with Taylor Swift, the way she's cultivated it, it's so hard to review stuff on its own merit if you're a fan and look at it like, what is this music good or not? She could literally probably put out an a cappella album of her reading these lyrics and people would say it's a classic or something.
There was this thing about I can't remember what it was exactly, but like a bit of audio accidentally got released that was like static and it went to #1. Do you know about that story?
I haven't heard.
So, but
That's so
the other thing,
insane.
the last thing I want to say in terms of the review
This may be the
angle
last
is
one.
it just we spoke about this a lot in the previous video, that it just waters down the things that are good, because when something really good comes out and there's this cultural moment, we're kind of seeing it a bit at the moment with challenges. It's like the soundtrack and everything. It's like, this is so good. It's so fun to be a part of this and say how good this is.
Yeah.
And I used
Oppenheimer or
and I used Renaissance by Beyonce as an example in the previous video. Going to that tour and experiencing that album and like the period that album came out in, where it was kind of that post-COVID, all the dance albums were coming out, everyone wanted to like get out and be social again, and everyone was feeling really like feral, and that was such a moment. And I remember like my best friend, she was like, do you want to come over and we'll listen to that album?
Yeah.
Can you imagine our generation, like that sort of millennial Gen Z border, saying, come to my house and we'll listen to an album? That's
Yeah.
what our parents used to do. So it was such a moment. And like, when something is that good, it deserves to have that moment. But then people are pretending like everything is deserving of that kind of praise.
Yeah.
Because it's fun. I said this before. It's fun if you're a young person to be part of that, fandom and part of that hype. But it's like, yeah, but you're taking away from when something is actually good.
Yeah.
And it's like I said, the death of cultural criticism. It's like, if you are critical of the bad thing, it will make when the good thing comes along even better. Like when Folklore came out. Like, I've been re-listening to Folklore loads recently, and I love that album. I love the nuance of it. I love the lyrics. I love the way Taylor Swift delivers certain lines in that album. And it's like, she can be amazing. Like, she can be so good. So this album is such a massive letdown,
Yeah.
because everyone thought it was going to be more of that, and it just isn't.
Final point.
on this long Taylor Swift journey. Yeah, like with Mr. Beast, obviously Taylor Swift is still insanely popular, and if I've titled this video something a bit inflammatory, I think it might be the start of the downfall. So Mr. Beast, like, he is more popular than ever, but he's also receiving more criticism than ever, because it seems like with certain people, celebrities, you have this era where no one can say a bad word about you. Like literally, they can't say a bad word about you because they have so many mad fans who go after you, and just like, not, you know, random people will be like, well, why are you hating on this person? And now, like, you know, as I've said, she has had criticism in her life, but it feels like for the last 4 years, it's been hard to say anything negative, especially with the music press and stuff. And I just feel like, you know, it's not Taylor Swift as a person. Like, no one knows Taylor Swift as a person. None of her fans know her as a person. Everything you think you know about her is carefully put out there, curated. She wants you to think you know her because it's a,
Or you know an older version of her when she was more visible.
Yeah, it's everything she does is very strategic corporate strategy to sell as much things as possible, because remember, Taylor Swift isn't one person who makes a load of money. There are a bunch of people around her who also make a load of money, right? So it's on all of them to make as much money as possible. And if the quality is lowered but the product is, you know, maximized, like with many things we see in the world, that's, you know, and we know with capitalism, immediate profit is more important than long-term profit, then that's what's going to happen. They would rather, maybe she would, but I can't say that, they'd rather burn her out quicker to make as much money as possible now and move on to the next thing, that's capitalism for you, then rather be like, how do we sustain her until she's like old? Like, how does she stay relevant until she's like 60, like some of the old artists, right? They're not thinking about that. They're thinking about, how can we take this moment and maximize revenue? And there's so many stories in the music industry of people who've done that, or people who've rejected that, and ultimately it led them to being like either irrelevant or people who didn't have these very profitable careers because they didn't want to become basically, you know, a consumer capitalist product. And I get it's a balancing act as well. You do have to make things that sell, that people like and you care about. As someone who does YouTube, it's not the same, but I have to think about, what do I care about, what will do well, and what will make me money, because it's my job, right? I get that balancing act, but sometimes when you're sticking out cynically, in my opinion, 30 song albums and not cutting back anything and just thinking, yeah, that's all good. To me, it's just like the MCU. It's good to a certain extent. It's good in terms of you won't turn it off. And maybe to people who don't love music outside of the charts, it's fine, right? But it's just something to consume. It's not something to feel any, like you're saying, you don't feel any way about it because it wasn't designed for that, right? It's designed more with the profit in mind and the business in mind rather than doing anything interesting. So that's my final point.
And I want to make the distinction that a bad Taylor Swift album is different to a normal bad album from an artist, because every artist will, you know, an album might just be a miss and it's kind of like, oh yeah, that one didn't land very well.
Yeah.
Then they come back and they have a better album. And like you said, it's a balancing act. It's like, how much do you want to kind of give the fans what they want? How much do you want to serve your own artistic purposes? How much do you want to try and sustain the career that you've built and make the compromises that you have to make to continue that career? One of which is doing press, which a lot of people hate, but it's like, well, if you want to be in the mainstream music cycle, you have to do press, just what you have to do. So the difference with a bad Taylor Swift album is there's so much extra context going on, which has contributed, I believe, and you do as well, as to why it is bad. It's not, oh, this is a misfire, this isn't Taylor's best work. I just feel like there's so much stuff going on around it that's contributed to it, mainly what we were saying about like the consumerism and the overconsumption of the everything that she's put out. And I would just like to make my final point that I really like Taylor Swift, so this isn't like a hate video, like I said, and it's just super disappointing. I've listened to the album maybe like 3 or 4 times now. Nothing is pulling me back in, and I think it's just gonna probably go unlistened for like the rest of this year.
Yeah, that's the whole 2 videos on like commercialism and music. Taylor Swift is the perfect embodiment of that, and in the same way Mr. Beast is the embodiment of that on YouTube, and the MCU used to be the embodiment of that with movies, and maybe she'll go the way of the MCU where she'll still be very popular, she'll still make loads of money, but maybe the masses will be a bit like, this isn't actually that good, like it's fine. More like how we've been talking about it. So yeah, that's it for the video. I would say follow Holly on stuff, but she probably doesn't
like want anyone following, I guess.
Let's see how this video does.
And yeah, follow me on everything, all the usual stuff.
Well, if they really want to find me, they'll find me on your stuff.
Nice and long, and if you made it this far, thank you for watching.